refresh.
Okay, we're on.
All right. Another episode of the Creative Collective show in quarantine.
Live from quarantine.
Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creative Collective show. This one's a little bit different as the last couple episodes have been. We are coming at you live from our houses. So I'm your host, Dan.
I'm Zach.
And today we have a very special guest, Janet from the JS Group. How's it going, Janet?
Going great. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Excited to see your faces, even if we're not together. It's still good.
Yeah, thanks for taking out the time to hang out with us today. Before we get into the show, if you guys haven't already, check out our podcast. It's on all major platforms, the Creative Collective show, obviously. And you can check it out on Spotify, Apple, CastBox, Stitcher, whatever that may be, whatever you use to listen to. If you listen on Apple, please leave us a review. That means a ton to us, and it helps us know if we're doing well. And it also ranks us higher up on the podcast charts. If you are creative in the New Jersey, New York area, check out our Facebook group. It's NJ/NYC Creative Collective. It is a Facebook group for you to connect with other creators and like-minded individuals in your space, whether you do videography, photography, graphic design, web design, social media, whatever it may be. There is, there's a ton of information there, people connecting, critiquing each other, all of that good stuff. If you don't follow us already on social media, check us out at Strix Media NJ on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever that may be. And in a time like this with the coronavirus going around, we also have 50 tips on our website. If you want to head over to strixmedia.com, there's 50 tips to supercharge your social media campaign. So they're really just ideas on different types of posts that you can make for your business or your brand. And I think that more than ever, these are great to go through. I think there's literally 56 of them in there. Let us know what you think about it. Feel free to reach out. One last thing before we start is that we're also doing 15 or 30 minute, whatever you guys want to talk about. We're doing consulting phone calls. So if you want to give us a call, talk about your social media campaign, talk about some video ideas that you should be doing, maybe some live stream ideas. If you want to talk about hardware that you need to purchase to step your game up while being stuck in quarantine, we'd love to talk to you. Give us a call, shoot us an email, whatever that may be. I think I nailed it that time, Zach. What do you think?
You did good. You did great.
I did it good. Okay.
I have no pickups for you, so.
Okay, good.
We're on.
Teamwork makes the dream work. That's awesome. All right, so let's get into it. Zach, kick us off.
All right. So, Janet, actually, why don't you kick us off? Tell our viewers and our listeners who you are and what do you do?
Well, I'm Janet Schijns because I'm a wicked bad Star Wars fan, so I'm just going to kick off with that. So in other words, I'm a little geeky, and I work leading a technology consultancy firm that I have a co-founder who's actually my husband, so that's kind of cool. And I had a long career in corporate America. I worked for brands like Verizon, Office Depot, Motorola, and also a long career in consulting before that. Say that twice, career in consulting. It's not that easy. And had this company once before. So kind of, entrepreneur, corporate entrepreneur. I focus primarily on how technology companies can take solutions to market in a way that resonates with buyers. So often geek speak doesn't translate well. And so I always see myself as the human interface to the robots in our industry. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. All right. So let's
back to you.
Yeah. Let's take your story all the way back to like when you first got into like. Let's go way back to say high school. Like let's start there and quickly migrate forward. What were you passionate about then? How did you get into the spaces you are now? And what led you down that path?
So I had a very different high school experience than most people. I was critically ill. I had a lung disorder. So my junior year and senior year were spent primarily in the hospital. Died a couple times. I was in ICU on life support. Yeah. Actually at Marshtown Memorial Hospital, which is right near where you guys are.
Oh my God.
I spent the majority of my teenage years, unfortunately, in the hospital, but managed to recover. And so it really changed my perspective. I thought that I was going to be something more active. I was a field hockey player and a cheerleader, embarrassingly, and a few other things. And I always thought it would be something very active. Maybe I'd go into sports marketing or, be some kind of a teacher or something. And that really changed my mind because I was a pretty sucky student. I'm not somebody who sits well, like, you tell me what to do and I'm going to do it and turn my homework in. I'm more that person that's like, I don't know, I think I understand it. I'm good. And so my dad always said, I was always ducking out the window, trying to get out of class. So I wasn't the best student, but when I got sick, I had one-on-one tutoring. And so I became a very good student. I got great grades and was able to go to college, something that prior to that, I wasn't 100% sure I was going to do. So I went to college for finance, and I thought I was going to be a day trader, a Euro day trader, actually, at this company called Garvin Guy Butler. And I lasted 3 days. And my boss told me that he thought that it was really great because he had a friend at L'Oreal Cosmetics, which is owned by Nestle. And he said, I've got this great opportunity for you to go over there and go into merchandising. And I said, well, but I have a job here. And he said, well, that's the other piece of news. Like, I don't really think you're going to fit in here.
Oh, wow.
You don't curse, you don't drink, you don't smoke. Like, I think you got to, find a different career path. So I went there and was immediately surrounded. And up until that time, I thought I was like kind of okay looking. And then I got in this room with all these women that were trying out for this job. And they were just like, they were gorgeous, right? Because it was a job at L'Oreal Cosmetics. So it really appealed to, I guess, super pretty women. So, but 25 women interviewed for the job, and I was the only person that passed the math test.
Wow.
So I got the job. So I always said that no matter where I went, kind of that finance degree comes in handy. So fast forward, I'm a total geek. I'm, building my computer system on, this is, early days, right? This is like late 80s. I'm building my own computer systems, early gaming. And I realized that the IBM WebSphere team was there, and they were trying to sell the technology to the division I was now in. And everybody was looking at them like, what are you saying? So I took their, PowerPoint slides and I said, give me like a couple hours. I'm going to try to fix them to what you're actually trying to say. And that began my career in technology consulting.
Wow.
I had a young child, somebody that you and Dan know, named Sean. I had a young kid and another one on the way, and was tired of corporate America. And the IBM team said, hey, if you want to do this and consult for us, you can consult for us. So I walked out, of work with my first consulting client, and then managed to get a lot of others along the way. And so I had my own consulting firm, raised my kids, ran it, actually bought a new house and ran it out of the basement of that house, because the way the basement of that house was, it was like 7,000 square feet. It was amazing. It was a walkout basement. And so my kids were kind of raised above the shop. But it made for a nice lifestyle for us because I could be home and with them, and also be in the tech industry, something I had never trained for. I had no technical expertise. I just loved sci-fi and tech and computers and gaming, and so I could geek out. But then because I had a background at that point in time, I'd done marketing and merchandising, right, and finance, I was able to put the pieces together. So that's how the consulting started.
So how did you go from L'Oreal to IBM? Was there like a process, like when did you go off on your own and like branch out, like kind of separate yourself from like the typical corporate world?
Yep. So I got lucky and I went from L'Oreal to Cosmere, which was a division that did like tri-minute cough syrups and heart medicines and, all of that kind of stuff. And they put me in charge of this thing called Telereach. And that's where I came in contact with IBM. IBM had this cool, hard for you guys to believe this, but they had this cool start of the web where you could maybe take or process some orders, right, using an online interface, which was unheard of, right? This was early 90s, right? So completely unheard of. But when they presented it, it was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? You know, they had all this technical jargon, and I just simplified it down to like 4 slides that said, so that's what they want to do. So we would have 10 less reps, and we'd be able to process the orders versus make phone calls on the orders, like an order form. And this is amazing. And so when they saw that, they said, hey, can you do that for other clients? And I said, well, I can't really do that for other clients because I work for this one. And one of the guys from IBM, this guy, David, he said, well, I'll give you a contract for the year. Like,
oh, wow.
You know, and you can work with us on our channel. And I said, what's a channel? And what's funny about that question, what's a channel, is because last year I was the channel influencer of the year in the technology industry. So I learned what the channel was pretty quickly. But so that was how it started. And I went home, and I was a single mom. And I went home and I was talking to my dad about, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? What do you think? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I've been wanting to retire. I'll do it with you. I'll be your sales guy. I'll help you get some new accounts. So, you know, it's kind of a funny thing that now in my second generation of this, my daughter works in the company with me. So it's just always been a family firm.
Really cool.
You know, 20 people in the firm, but, you know, a couple of them always family. So that was how I got started. It just was on a whim. I just took the risk and, you know, got married, had my second child, and just stuck with it because from a lifestyle standpoint, nothing beats being an entrepreneur.
That's wild. So, and I 100% agree with that. So that's interesting. So you took this idea, hey, like, you know, your slides are very technical, very top level thinking. No one's really understanding it. You have to dumb these down. So, you know, put into like layman terms so everyone can understand.
Right.
But that also required you to have a better understanding of the tech stack, I guess, if you will, so you can better, you know, shuffle that information into something that's more easy to understand. Okay, so then you got a contract out of that with technically your employer, but then you became a contract worker, and then so you had a year contract, and within that year you had migrated to become a completely independent, like you started at JS Group from this point, or was it not JS Group? Oh,
no,
wow.
it was JS Group. Yeah. So I started that and, you know, just started to say, well, you know, might as well, right? It makes sense. And I got very lucky because when I went to get my computer for my contracting, I ran into somebody that I also worked with, but at L'Oreal, Barry Smolowitz, shout out Barry. And he was a franchisee in a software, something called Software City, which is gone now, but it was awesome back then when you used to buy software in like a box. Picture GameStop, right? But make it software. And so I was in there and I was telling him what I was doing. And he's like, oh my God, you know, you were the best market person we ever had. Do you think you could help my small business? And I said, well, I don't know. You know, I've got this big contract. I'm trying to learn about resale and distribution in the channel. And he's like, oh, I'm in the channel. That's interesting. So I said, look, if you'll tell me what you're doing and explain it to me, I'll help you. So we did kind of a barter. He gave me a computer for free and all the software that I needed. I looked at how he was going to market, which was awful because he was a techie, geeky guy. And I changed it. And then his franchise ownership came back and said, hey, wait a minute, who did this work? It's much better than the normal stuff you do. And he said, well, she did. And they had me in and they retained me to do it for the whole franchise. And then I convinced somebody that had worked for me in the past to join me. So that was the first kind of friend of mine. She also was having kids. I'm like, come on, like, just come in with me. We'll take this account. How hard could it be? Like, they suck, you know, their techs, they couldn't even ask somebody to the prom. Like, this is who owns these places. Yeah. They didn't have a prom date. Like, no matter what we do is going to be better than what they're doing because they're introverts, like, at their computer. And oh, by the way, Facebook wasn't around yet. So we did that and it took off. And so over the years, it was, you know, we went to about 20 employees. The kids got older. We had amazing accounts. I actually built the channel program for NVIDIA, right? Which you know knows now. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And Intel, and you know, some really big names. I worked with Cisco in Europe. I gave keynotes in Australia and China, and it was insane. It was great. And then, you know, in the course of that, the economy went not well in 2007, 2008. You remember this? Everything starts to crash. The housing market crashes. And consultants always are the ones that get hit first. And there was no doubt we would have lived through that, no doubt. But, you know, I'm like a cat. I like to land on my feet. So I kind of looked at the market and said, like, I don't love this. And we had a huge contract with Motorola. And Motorola owned this company called Symbol, which does all the barcoding. When you go to a store and they barcode an item, they do that. And we were doing all of the channel for them. So all of their third-party resellers, marketing programs, sales programs, development programs, and they liked us. And so I was in a meeting with the CEO and of Symbol and the CEO of Motorola. We were going through some consulting stuff, and at a break when we got some coffee, I may have mentioned that I'd be willing to get back into corporate America. And, you know, I meant it. And I knew the kids were old enough. They were, you know, in college and high school by then. And I could kind of branch out. And they came back about 3 days later with a very, very generous offer, including, you know, buying out some of my staff and buying out the intellectual property. And so I said, you know, how can you not go to a Motorola, which at the time was a big brand, right? How can you not go to a Motorola? They're struggling with how they, you know, the iPhone's out. They're struggling with how they get past the Razor. You've got a reputation in the field and they're willing to pay you a lot of money. Go. And so I, you know, shockingly to everybody, took my team who wanted to. We had a couple of people that wanted to step out and just, you know, relax, and took them to Motorola. And
interesting. So Motorola kind of like absolved you.
They did. It made me vice president of worldwide channels. So,
wow.
And to be fair, with my personality, I never would have made vice president if I had been in corporate America. Like, there's just no way. I probably would have been fired 5 times, because I'm the person that says to the CEO, I don't think that's a good idea. And when you're farther down the ranks, that's not accepted. When you're you're like, oh, okay, what do you think a good idea is? But when you're farther down the ranks, you go, excuse me, that's a dumb idea. That doesn't go well for your career. So I don't think I would have made it to VP unless I had went that path.
Interesting.
So quick question before we go any further.
Yeah.
I want to talk about 2 things. Maybe a personal struggle of yours when you were starting up your business, and then your aha moment when you're like, you know, this is it. Like we've got something here, you know, full steam ahead. So let's start with the struggle.
So the struggle. So, you know, and this is a struggle that unfortunately hasn't improved that much. Women and technology are not, you know, they're like oil and water. So that's not something I was used to. So, you know, being at a consumer goods company like L'Oreal and Cosmere, I was very unfamiliar with the fact that men didn't see women often in technology. And I'm going to attribute good intentions here with bad actions versus bad intentions and bad actions. And so they just would block you out of conversations. You wouldn't get invited to the bar. You wouldn't be part of the in team. They'd talk over you. And so it kind of became something that was difficult to handle with me as a struggle, right? And now, you know, I'm much older and much wiser. And if somebody interrupts me, I go, excuse me, you're talking over me, right? But when you're, you know, 30, you know, and you're in a room with 40 and 50-year-olds who've been in the business a long time and they're talking over you, it's very intimidating. And so what I did was I went to this guy, Dr. Marty Cashman. He's amazing. He's a behavioral psychologist. So he doesn't like lay you on the couch and talk about your mom, because all of us would have stories, right? Even my kids. Instead, he talks about how can you change your behavior. So he taught me all this stuff, like where women naturally sit like this, and you got to sit like this when you're at a table, take more space, how to get people to not interrupt you, how to command attention, how to do things to stop people. Like, for example, instead of saying, you're interrupting me, going, excuse me, right? Because the hand is almost an international signal of like, something's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like stop, right? And so he kind of trained me to handle it without being, and I'm gonna break the curse wall, without being a total bitch, which is the word that most people use for women when they're too strong. So that was the struggle. That really was the struggle. And it's a struggle that still exists. So I run a group on Facebook called Tech World's Half. We're dedicated to keeping women in technology, because women drop out of technology at 3 times the rate of men.
Wow.
Because it is that uncomfortable and that lonely. And so we have thousands of members. And for our members who are either watching or will watch this later, since it is during the workday, so a lot of them are at work, will watch this tonight. You know, this is one of those messages where you have to find a way through. And so we're very dedicated to that, and our members are very dedicated to that. So that's my struggle story.
Quick thing before we keep going. If you guys are watching on Facebook or YouTube right now, feel free to ask Janet any questions that you may have. Comment #live if you're watching live with us. Hit that share button, hit the like button. It means so much to us that we can get the word out about our podcast and Janet's story. And if you are watching the replay of this, comment #replay while you're watching. All right, so let's get to the aha moment. What was the moment when you're like, this is it, like we've got this, full steam ahead?
So I actually have 2 aha moments, so
okay.
I have to do them both, right? So my first aha moment was, as I started consulting, I was getting a ton of business. I was so excited, right? It was like, wow, look at this. Everybody wants to work with us. This is awesome. Because I was so much cheaper than everybody else. Because I had translated what I used to make an hour, right? And what my friend that was in the business with me used to make an hour. And I was kind of marketing it up a little bit and I'm good to go. And I hadn't really thought through the costs of the business, but also what the market would bear. So my prices were probably half of my competitors. And it did 2 things. It slowed my growth initially because, of course, then you can't get high quality people to join you when you were paying what they used to make in corporate America, but without all the good perks, benefits, vacations, corporate, you know, fluff. But it also made me a few enemies in the industry of competitors versus friends, where we would refer business to each other based on competencies, because they were like, she's undercutting the market. So that was my first aha moment, is you really need to understand your competitors' pricing schemata. And you also have to understand how you're different from your competitors. And you need to make sure you guys, you know, like, not with price setting, because that's illegal, right? But understanding your marketplace and understanding where you're pricing, and then not undercutting on stuff you're no good at. You know, learning to refer that to somebody else, that really helped me grow my business to the next level. And even today, about 30% of my business I get from a competitor who said, hey, she's better at that than me. And by the way, I do the same thing and give business away all the time, because I'd rather work with somebody that's amazing than try to do that myself. You guys are a great example. We use you for a lot of our marketing and videos and website, etc. Could we do it ourselves? Sure, right? You know, we could, but why would we, right? It's not our strongest competency. And then my second aha moment, which I think is even more interesting, is that if you start as an entrepreneur and you segue into corporate America, you can make so much more money than if you'd worked your way up the ranks. So I started to learn what other people in the vice president ranks at Motorola made. And it was like a lot less than me, even though I was a woman, and women are traditionally paid less, right? That's just the statistic. So coming from a different background, being able to bring that entrepreneurial background into something has a lot of value. There's a lot of value in corporate America. So if you're listening to this as an entrepreneur and you're thinking, hey, at some point in time, I'm going to sell my firm, or you know, consolidate, or look to put my firm into a bigger company, understand that that entrepreneurial value is worth a lot in corporate America, more than you're working the way up the ranks would be. So don't be afraid, be an entrepreneur. You can always go back to corporate for more money.
Yeah. So I was totally going to mention that before, how you kind of like skipped the ranks, if you will, because like you did your own thing, you know, you grew on the side and then came back in later on top, which is a very interesting way of doing it. And it's a really good segue for anyone who's listening to say, hey, like, this is a possible option for you.
Right.
Well, I was going to ask you what your first hire process looked like. And damn, I have a question before this one, but like, what was it like to, or like, how did you go about deciding which person to hire next or first?
That's a great question. And by the way, hiring is the Achilles heel of all people. So the first thing I will say is I used said behavioral psychologist to interview every person that I hired in the company. Wow. Because I wanted people not just for their skills, but people that would fit in. It was important, right? I mentioned earlier I had the you know, the shop of under the house type kind of thing, because I wanted to be there for the kids. So I didn't, of course, I did very serious background checks, which I would tell you now more than ever is important to do. But I also wanted people that would fit in, that we were a team, we were a family, and we're still that way. You know, JS Group 2, we're a family. Even if you're not related, we're still a family. If you're having a tough time, we're going to be there for you. And so I'm very focused on the cultural fit, much more so that I'm focused on the job that the person will do. I believe you hire for the person, you'll find the job. And so my first couple hires, Karen Schur, shout out to her. She's at Zebra, a Motorola spinoff. So she stuck with that after we went there. She was one of my first big hires. She had been at Intel Dialogic. She was a client. They had a layoff. She was, hotly pursued in the industry because everybody, wanted her. So she took the package because, that's how you double dip and get new kitchens. For those of you who've been in corporate America, you're laughing at that comment because you get the package, you get a job the next week, you have 6 months of severance. So that's the money you use to, upgrade your kitchen. Or through college or whatever. So that was always the joke, like, oh, there's a package coming. I think I'm going to upgrade my kitchen.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, as long as you were a top performer. If you're not a top performer or the market's bad, that's not a good approach. But if it is, you raise your hand because you get a package. And so she came in and, again, as a client, I knew her very well. But the first thing I hired for was someone to manage me. I'm a lot to manage. I'm the talent even now in the business. I go out to do the keynotes. I'm customer facing. People want to deal with, the Jedi, quote unquote. But I needed someone to manage all the back end, right? What do you do? How do you do your project management? How do you make sure your customers are, truly impressed with your work? How do you make sure you're billing and you're really straight? So that was the first hire I made, the back end. And by the way, it's the hardest hire to make because it's not always 100% billable. And it's so easy as an entrepreneur to book the next person who's billable and then realize you pissed off 10 clients in the last month because your back end isn't operating.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it's a really big investment. It's a big risk. Like, okay, I had to put someone on. Were they on payroll or were they on contract?
Yeah. So at that time they were on payroll. Yeah, I went with payroll because I wanted to make sure I had health insurance for people. That is always an important issue, and there was not in the Affordable Health Care Act then. So it was very difficult to get insurance, self-insure. So, back in the, 90s and early thousands, that was something that really, if you didn't have a 401k and a health insurance plan, you weren't getting people. So I started my own 401k, I started a health insurance plan, and I hired. And, when business is tough, that's a rough decision because you still have to make payroll. Right? When business is great, it's a great decision because they actually make less than a contractor would. Because they, the work you give them is work they have to do. They're exempt employees, right? So I could argue both sides of that fence.
Interesting. Interesting.
So do you believe in the what is the saying? I might butcher this. Hire slow, fire fast, or whatever that saying is.
No, I believe that you hire slow and you fire slow. So I believe any bad hire is on me. I screwed that up then. That's not on them. That's on me. I don't believe in a bad hire. I believe in bad managers. Now, look, if somebody lied to you in their resume, misrepresented, or your business changed, maybe you were doing a lot of X and now you're doing a lot of Y. So, the person no longer fits. That's understandable, forgivable. But if not, you're just a bad leader. And I hear so many people say I made a bad hire. And I every time say, no, so you're not a good manager because you shouldn't have hired him in the first place. And again, you have your 10 or 15% that lied, and if your business changes, if not, it's on you, it's on your shoulders. And every fire that you have to do. And again, for the corporate folks and friends, I know there's layoffs, so that this doesn't count for layoffs, right? Sometimes you just get a target. But every fire you do should hurt you as bad as if you fired yourself. So I used to do a little program where if I let somebody go, I had to donate money to a charity. I would punish myself. I would punish my own earnings if I let somebody go. So they would get their severance or whatever that they would get. And I would actually put more money out of my own pocket to a charity because I felt like I had to give back because I screwed that person's life up, right? I hurt that person. So.
Wow.
Very cool.
I love that. I love how it's you're very genuine and like open and transparent with all that.
It's on me. And I always tell people you never leave Team Schijns. That's my saying. So you never leave Team Shines. Doesn't matter. No matter where you go to work, doesn't matter what job you do, whether you're in the company with me, not in the company with me, you never leave my team. So you can call me anytime. I'll help you. But I expect that if I call you, you'll help me. So that's kind of the process that I've functioned under my entire career.
Love that.
Can you talk a little bit more about leadership and how you've either grown that skill or things that you've learned along the way that could help some other people? Because I think that a lot of the stuff that you just spoke about, being a business owner ourselves, hiring, firing, making your first, like all of that stuff is more or less a make or break moment. You know, you can mess up in that stuff, but those steps in when you are growing a business and just starting out or starting to grow and things like that are the most difficult, because you really can't watch a YouTube video on that. Like you can't go like how to hire and like watch 3 videos and learn how to do that. So
you maybe can, but it won't be very good.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are YouTube videos, some wacky person going, here's what you should do. So I would say, you know, it's interesting because I was able to be at a big company to start and then a big company again. I get a lot of great training. So I don't ever discount training. I had executive coaching. I was at Verizon and Office Depot in very senior leadership roles as I was in Motorola. And so, you know, when you get to that level, which is really interesting, they invest a lot of money in your training and your education. So I'm going to pull on some of that and then pull on some of my entrepreneurial leadership lessons. So my first leadership lesson came from my dad. I had been a manager when I left my company, so I thought I knew everything about, you know, you're going to write performance reviews and there's going to be raises and that has like nothing to do with entrepreneurial leadership at all. That's, you know, just way too corporate. And my dad said, you can't ask anyone to do a job you wouldn't do. So as we were getting ready to hire our first salesperson, which we thought was important, my dad and I went out in his van and went door to door trying to get business for days in the freezing cold in New Jersey. And knocked on doors and in like corporate tech parks, right? Up in Manalapan and Mahwah, and right. And it was nasty, right? You get thrown out on your butt, you know, make phone calls and people would say, I'll talk to you. Like, who the hell are you? Right. And it was tough. And then we said, okay, now we feel like we can hire a salesperson because we know what it's actually going to take. When we got a sale, we understood the numbers it would take. We understood, you know, just the sheer like, oh my gosh, you know, and also all the marketing materials, you know, the first person that asked us for a sales slick and we were like, no, but we can tell you what we do. We have a deck. Like, no, leave your sales slick. Like, don't have one, right? So it taught us a lot about what to do. And then like when you got the first person live on the phone and you thought, wait, you answered? I have no idea what I'm going to say.
I made it down.
Voicemail. Okay, seriously, it was supposed to go to voicemail. Can I hang up and call back? So
my first sales manager told me that if you mess up what you were selling or didn't remember what to say or like whatever, he said, crinkle up a piece of paper into the phone and hang up.
I love it. So that was my first leadership lesson was don't hire anybody where you wouldn't be willing or able to do the job. And able may not be a thing, but willing should be a thing, right? You may not be able to do code or, you know, do something, but you should be willing to work the hours or willing to go there.
Sure.
You know, my second leadership lesson, I think, came actually from working with the Intel team. So Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel, I was very blessed to have a relationship with him and for him to mentor me. And one night we were leaving the office. I had been there consulting. He was walking out at the same time. And if people don't know who Andy Grove is, he was the founder of Intel and he was just a legendary leader and a legend in the technology industry, a legend. Your computer works today because Andy Grove figured out how to make the company called Intel. So, you know, we were leaving one night and he was saying goodnight to one of the janitors and he turned to me and said, do you know his name? And I said, absolutely. He's here like every night when I'm here, when I'm consulting, right? And, you know, and told him his name. And he goes, see, that's the lesson I wanted to see if you knew. He said, if you don't know about everybody in your organization, you're going to fail. And, you know, don't forget the people that are doing jobs that maybe don't touch you every day, but they're just as important of a member of the team. And that was an amazing leadership lesson to realize that people want to be recognized. They want to be called by name. They want to be, you know, spoken to with respect, no matter what they're doing in your company. They all have a value. And then I'll say my third one probably came at Verizon. So I worked for John Stratton. John was the COO, and he's a phenomenal guy. He's on the board at General Dynamics now. And he gave me this leadership lesson because we were all excited about all the things that we could do in the business. And he turned and he said, hey, sell the bananas on the cart. I'll let you know when we have oranges. And I stopped and I was like, that's such a great thing to say. Like, could you just sell what we have? And when we have oranges, like, somebody will let you know, right? And it was so succinct as a leader. It wasn't this big, long coaching session. I was running sales at the time, right? It wasn't a big, long coaching session around, I need your team to dig in, or, it was just, hey, do me a favor, sell the bananas we got. I'll let you know when there's oranges. It was so succinct. And I think leaders sometimes aren't succinct enough in their feedback. So that was a kind of another couple of leadership lessons. I can build on anything you want, but I thought I'd pause there.
Well, yeah. So that being said, because you are an entrepreneur, and every entrepreneur in in the grand scheme of it all is a salesperson.
Yes.
So you're either selling yourself, you're selling your services, you're hiring, which you need to sell your company to the person you're hiring. I mean, everything is a sale. So when you were just starting out, because I'm sure it's way different now, how did you go about prospecting clients? And then do you have any advice to anyone that, is trying to brush up their sales skills, or, whether they're going after big or small companies, something that you use in maybe an everyday, that can help people?
And you know what? It hasn't changed any since I started it. So when I left I was executive vice president at Office Depot, right? So you're talking, the 5 people, 6 people, or, that run a company, right? With the board all the time. So very executive position. And I left to start my consulting firm because my non-competes were up and I could work in tech again, and I wanted to, and wanted to stay in Florida and do great things. And the first question that my husband, Roy, who's phenomenal and a co-founder with me, and God bless him, because I'm not that easy to work with. It's true. He said, "How are you going to get prospects? Like, how are you going to get business? Like, this is, you haven't done it for a decade. You've been in corporate America for a decade. How are you going to get business?" And I shared with him my belief, and I want to share it here, that your business prospecting all comes down to your brand, and not your company brand, your personal brand. So, do people know what you're good at? And would they think of you as good at that if someone said, I wonder who I could talk to about X or Y or Z? And so I sat down before I made the decision to start the company back up, and I said, what am I good at? And one thing I know I've always been good at is, speeches and bringing teams together. And by the way, people say, yeah, but you're also great at go-to-market and, solution development, channel strategy. Why didn't you focus on that? Because really and honestly, my biggest thing is, I'll give you the answers. We have great consultants, we'll give you the answers, but at some point in time, we're going to have to sell that to someone in your company to implement. So, my ability to influence was really important. And so I just sat down and I made a list, and I said, what would I need to do in order to be influential, in order to make sure that that influence isn't just in the company I'm at, but that it goes out. And so I invested a lot. In fact, Dan actually helped me with this. I invested a lot in building a social media profile, because when I started the business the first time, that wasn't a thing, right? So you did direct mail, you made phone calls, you had salespeople. Now it's a thing. It's not what you say you are, it's what people say you are. And so I really worked for the 6 months before I started the business on building my profile. And there's an award in our industry I mentioned earlier, the Channel Influencer of the Year. And so I sat down and I did all the math on what would I have to do to win? Like, what did it look like? And I got Ashlyn, who at the time was pursuing her PhD, as my daughter, and said, hey, I need your help. Let's do this every day. I need you to help me because I need to hit this score. And I won Channel Influencer of the Year. And then I started my business. So I got a front page cover of a magazine the first month of my business, because I knew the timing of the award. I knew the timing.
That's wild. That's so wild.
It's all about influence, right? And that
strategy.
Strategy. It goes to people, but it also is on the web, right? And then you get a keynote at their annual event. So I started my business in January. The cover came out in February. Their event was late March, early April. And God bless them, channel partners. They were, they've always been big supporters. I was always a big supporter of theirs. And it just started from there with people saying, well, what are you doing? And, you know, we got our first contracts I had business the first week we started.
Holy shit.
So, because I went to everybody and said, and that's probably the second lesson, humble does not play well. And if you're going to try to start a business and sell, you cannot be humble. You have to hustle. And you have to ask people for help, and you have to ask people for business. And yeah, it's embarrassing sometimes, right? That you have to say, hey, you know, do you have budget? Do you have money? You know, what are you doing here? What are you doing there? Who do you know? Who can you refer me to? But if you're not willing to do that for yourself and your people, then you shouldn't be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
100%.
So you mentioned a keynote speech, right? So I know, you know, from knowing you for a while now, that you've done quite some keynotes, and I believe you've done a TED Talk.
I have.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Talk. So it's a TEDx talk, to be fair.
That's still cool.
I've done a TV thing with C-Suite TV. So there's been some really cool things. And so what I'll tell you is keynoting is, people always say, oh, you're a great public speaker. I am a rehearsed public speaker, and people forget that, right? They think, oh, she just gets up there and she starts talking, right? No, you could turn my slides off. You could turn the lights off in the house. You could do anything you needed to do, and I would still know what I was saying because I rehearsed. I actually take this and I record myself on it. I listen to it. I listen to it and listen to it. I'm rehearsed. And that's what it takes to be good at something like a TED Talk, like a C-Suite TV session, like a keynote. I just gave a keynote this fall, you know, 1,700 people in the room. That's a big audience. And you have to be, you know, just dead set. And by the way, I tell the story because I think it's funny. 1,700 people in the audience. The speaker before me blew it because the speaker notes were gone. And a lot of people use a quote unquote comfort monitor below them on the screen. It wasn't there. You couldn't see your slides. You couldn't see your stuff.
Oh no.
And I just said, I don't care. And the girl said, no, seriously, like, you don't understand. You can't even see your slides. I'm like, I don't know why I would need to see my slides. I know my timing. I know when I'm clicking. Once in a while, I'll walk back and forth on the stage and make sure I didn't, you know, double click or something, but I don't know why I would need that. And by the way, if you paid that guy to keynote, you should get your money back because a good keynoter knows their pitch. So that's my key when I tell people, if you want to speak it, you better not need any notes or anything.
Right, cool. I love that. And what's funny, I actually read some article about TED Talks in general and how they're more like monologues where like everything is by the minute. Like you have to know exactly when you're done or when you start and when you finish, and you can't really like deviate at all. No, you can't. You think about like great comedians, right? They have the bits that they do. They know them cold. They don't have like a PowerPoint in front of them and they're clicking the next slide, right? Yeah. So for my next, right? You've never heard somebody say for the next joke. So that's always I like to watch comedians because they have good cadence and say that's where you've got to aspire to.
Very cool.
100%.
Can you, speaking about keynote speakers and speakers in general and people that are in your industry, do you have any people that you look up to or that you listen to often or that you've met that have definitely influenced you or taught you something, whether you actually met them in real life or you just listen to them online? So I love to listen to Richard Branson. I just think he's, you know, crazy cool. Elon Musk as well. They're just both crazy cool speakers and fun to watch. Tom Peters is somebody who I would really recommend. He's a genius at marketing and you know, and just kind of that surround. And then there's a woman in our industry. Her name is Tiffany Bova. She works for Salesforce. I think she might have the coolest job in technology. She's the chief evangelist for Salesforce, which is kind of cool. Oh, nice. Goes around and evangelizes for a tech platform. That's kind of fun. Yeah. He's amazing. And I think what I like about all of them is that they're just no fuss, no muss, you know, just really articulate and moving. Yeah, I think Elon Musk, he's just so interesting. And like you said, like he just does what he wants to. He's not influenced by like the market or what people like. When he brought out that the Cybertruck, like it kind of did look like a joke. And to this day, all right, so ready, this is interesting. I think we brought this up on another podcast. I think he's the smartest marketer on the planet because when he smashed that window, he meant to smash that window because he already knew he had so many eyes on him that he would have 15 million articles written about him smashing the window by mistake, but I guarantee you he did that purposefully.
And if he didn't, he recovered nicely, which by the way, if you're a good entrepreneur, you got to think on your feet, right? Things have to happen and you have to say, I meant that, or, you know, it's okay, we can recover from that, because things are not always going to go well. That's a fallacy, right? That's a kid's fairy tale. You can't assume that everything's going to go well all the time. So you have to get that outer shell that you don't get shook when something goes wrong, that you take it to your advantage. I once asked Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, what he did for a living, as a good example, because I didn't know it was him.
Oh, so, wow. Well, how did you respond? Can we go into that a little bit? I'm just curious to know what his response was and what he, It
wasn't great. His response was phenomenal. He was a magnificent leader. I was at L'Oreal at the time. I was at a big fundraising thing. He was there. Coincidences happened. I ended up at a table that he was at because one of our execs didn't show. And to make a long story short, I was, the sales. So I'm going to ask everybody, what do you do? Where do you come from? Right? I had all my little questions. And he said he was in sales. And so later in the evening, when I got up to go to the ladies' room, somebody pulled me aside and said, yo, idiot, you asked Sam Walton what he did for a living. Nice.
Wow.
But I went back to the table and I was like, well, okay, let me ask him a question. Like, why did you say you were in sales? And he said, and Dan, you touched on this. He basically said, if you're in business and you don't think you're in sales, you're a fool or you're waiting to be a fool. Because I'm selling banks and I'm selling communities on putting stuff in. And so then I went and sold him and said, how do I get L'Oreal and Walmart? And so fast forward, we sold the first L'Oreal installation into Walmart as long as as long as we could get it in by Thanksgiving. And I say that only because we had truck driver secretaries, myself, packing out stores in Waco, Texas, and 3 days before Thanksgiving just to get it done. So
wow.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
Sometimes it's okay to ask questions, right? It's okay to be that person as long as you can deal with it. And I see we have some questions. Oh, yay. Michelle Cook said, always Team Shines Live. Yay.
Hell yeah.
So what would you say is one of your biggest accomplishments or something that you were most proud of that, you accomplished as an entrepreneur or a business person?
Well, I haven't ever went out of business, so that's accomplishment number one. Sorry, guys, I'm a practical, tactical person, right? I haven't went bankrupt. Woo, win. I would say the other two things is being able to have a team that's always willing to come with you. So some of the team that was with me in the beginning is back with me now, and some of the team that was with me in corporate America is with me. So I would say that's a big accomplishment as an entrepreneur, a huge accomplishment. And then finally, both in my career as well as the business, I have a thing where I like to focus on the number 7. So I'll see if you guys can figure out why I like the number 7, and then I'll tell you.
7 days a week?
That's fine. That's not bad. Okay. How about 7 figures and $1 million?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good number.
That's a way better.
So I always tell people, if you can't build a 7-figure business, 8-figure if you're really successful. If you can't build a 7-figure business, take a step back. Doesn't mean you have to do it today. Doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow, but you have to be able to do it. And I'm very proud. JS Group in its first year, did the 7 figures, and I'm one of probably very few females in corporate America who earned a 7-figure income for for all of the years I was in corporate America on this most recent stint. So I think that 7 figures, it sounds awful because I know there's probably people listening saying, well, that's too much money and my business could never do that. And I understand. But if you don't have a business plan for how you could get there, listen, if you want a small business, great, then that's good. But you're probably not listening to an entrepreneur webcast then. But right, I think people need to think about how would it get bigger? What would it look like? Would it be with you? Would it be that you went with somebody else? So that's one of the things I always say. I didn't go out of business. My team was willing to follow me, and we're always focused on building a 7-figure business.
So I want to look at the other.
Do those 3 things.
For sure. So I want to look at the other side real quick. Was there anyone, like while you were coming up and while you're transitioning over to consulting and going off on your own, was there anyone that like didn't jive with you, or like said like, you know, Janet, I don't think this is a good idea. Why are you doing this? Like, you don't have the expertise in this. Any naysayers that you had to like overcome and like, you know, kind of block out?
Yeah, it was interesting. So my first rendition, a lot of people's husbands thought that they should give me that feedback. So a lot of my female friends' husbands were like, hang on, like, have you really thought about this? You know, you're making pretty good money. You're at a big brand. You know, I don't want to kill your dreams, but maybe you could do that on the side. And it was interesting because I know that it was well intended, right? They meant it to think that I hadn't thought it through, and they knew I was, you know, supporting myself, and they were nervous. And so that was one. And then, you know, most of my family was supportive. But my mom was actually a successful female corporate worker. She worked for Ford and a couple other companies, and she wasn't real supportive at first, especially since my dad was also retiring to start it. And this time around, yeah, right. She's like, wait, both of you? I'm not sure about this. And this time around, it was interesting. Most people were very supportive. But I did get a lot of people that said, wait, but you've made it. Like, you know, you were an officer at Motorola, you're an officer at Verizon, you're an EVP at Office Depot, you've made it. Why don't you just coast through for the next 7 or 10 years and enjoy the fact that you've made it? And I had to explain to them that for the entire 10 years, as much as I love the money I made, and I love my teams, and I loved what I did, and I feel we made really amazing strides, particularly in our channel, in all those companies, I missed being an entrepreneur the entire time, and I wanted to go home. And people didn't understand that feeling. You know that feeling you get when you've been away too long and you're like, I just want to go home? I had that feeling for a couple of years, and purposely designed leaving Verizon. I left on my own accord. They were lovely about it. Moving to Florida, being there for my dad, right? Starting at Office Depot, also lovely about me coming there. But I had designed everything in that journey to get back home. And home to me is having my own company.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people don't realize that there's no better feeling than accomplishing something for yourself. Like every time I get like we've been in business for 3 years now. Every time I get a sale, it is just like the first sale. It's the same excitement that you're able to help people, that it's personal for yourself, like all
Right.
of those feelings, you know, along with the bad things, you know, you should learn how to take the bad things that happen and turn them into positives and learn from those things instead of seeing them as just negative.
I agree, by the way. And, you know, it's so interesting because people don't get that, right? Some people think, oh, it's all about the money. And again, I like to run a 7-figure business. I'm not saying it's not about the money. But clearly I could probably make more money if I stuck on corporate, but it wouldn't be home for me. And I use that term home because I think people can feel it in their hearts, right? That 100%. Feeling of belonging, that feeling of being where you're happy and safe and productive. And being an entrepreneur is a hoot every day because you get to wear all the hats and have some fun. So.
Yeah, I also want to touch on something you mentioned too, when you were getting the constructive feedback to like, are you sure you want to do this kind of thing, right? You had mentioned, and you kind of said it in passing, but it's actually a really powerful thing that you did. You had assumed that they were coming from a good place, that they weren't trying to knock you down. You know, they were really just trying to give you all the best advice because they think that you didn't think it all the way through, even though you did.
Right, so, even though I did.
Yeah, even though you did, they still thought that you didn't, which is interesting because you're empathizing to the fact that they don't know the whole story.
That's right.
They're making an assumption based on what they think that you did, so it's not entirely true. So you said, okay, yeah, the information you're giving me is true in your story, but it's not my story. That's not actually what happened. So I can separate the constructive feedback,
right,
and look at it from a different perspective, and that's what helped you stay apart and harping on that negative. Like, should I really do this? Are they really right? Like, you were already in the zone to know that. Cool, they gave you information, but they didn't know all the pieces to give you the best information, and you knew that.
Right, and you know, I always run by this thought in my life and in my business that I assume the best intentions of people. If you prove me wrong, I'll stop being friends or stop working with you, but I always assume the best intention. So when you say something wrong or you do something wrong, I always just step back and say, what if I assumed that they had the best intention? If I treated them the way I would treat somebody I was super fond of when they did it, I would assume they had the best intention and they just made a mistake. So I try to apply that all the time. And I really feel it changes the relationship with people because they understand that you've got their back. And there's this phenomenal guy, Keith Ferrazzi. He runs Ferrazzi Greenlight. He wrote a book, Who's Got Your Back? And then his second book was Never Eat Alone. And I did executive leadership coaching with him at Verizon. God bless George Fisher for paying for that. George was my boss at Verizon at the time, and he's still a dear friend. Keith's program is phenomenal. Like, highly recommend, Who's Got Your Back as a book to read to change how you think about yourself as a leader.
Love that. Love that.
Did you, or do you currently, do you have any mentors, or did you have any mentors when you were starting up that really, really pushed you forward? Do you still have someone you call, every once in a while?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, my dad was one, right? Andy Grove, I mentioned. This gentleman, Gene Delaney, who was our president at Motorola, is a lifelong mentor for me. Somebody that was a mentor when I was at Motorola. And I realized that I wasn't like the other VPs because I hadn't come up through the ranks and I didn't have that secret decoder ring for corporate speak. He was just amazing as a mentor in that. And he still is to this day. And now, though, I find myself having more reverse mentors. So I find myself, in fact, Zach and I were in Phoenix together, and I asked him a couple questions about, well, how do you think about this and how do you think about that? And Dan, I've picked your brain, right? Ashlyn is probably my biggest reverse mentor in a daily mode. And I find now those reverse mentors, the folks in your generation, the millennials that are seeing a different world, is whose brain I need to pick to stay not only relevant, but also connected.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then you also get like a different perspective, if you will, too, because it's from a whole different like realm of like thinking.
Right. And it just, I think you can choose to be a citizen of the next generation, or you can choose to stick to your last generation thoughts. And I choose to be a citizen of the next generation. And so to do that, I need reverse mentors, as they're known, to teach me the ropes and teach me what they're thinking.
For sure.
Makes a lot of sense.
You had, so I want to quickly go back to the you becoming influencer of the year for your space, right? You said you worked very closely with your daughter in kind of like setting that up, and you knew kind of what points to hit. I'm just curious, was there any kind of content that you focused on from like, it could be more like from a holistic point? And like, how did you, like, you don't have to go into like all the details, but like, how did you go about, like, what was your strategy to become, like, to put yourself as the influencer of the space?
So I needed to figure out what my persona was. And I think everybody needs to do this. If your persona is not just about your company brand, right? Now people buy from people, it has to be about your personal brand. So first I crafted what was my persona. Why would people want to listen to me? Why would they want to talk to me? Then we changed my profile to make it, look like that, because it really looked like a resume. Because I've been in corporate America, it didn't look like somebody you wanted to engage with, right? It looked like somebody maybe you want to hire, but that wasn't what I was going for. And then we crafted content. Ashlyn wrote content for me around my platforms, which were women in technology, accelerating third-party channel sales and marketing. And I posted content every single day. Well, to be fair, she posted it for me, because if you're listening, this is something you can outsource. And so she did that, and we did engagement, and I engaged, and that was really the simplistic part of the journey. It's more work than that, but to me, the most important thing was the persona and valuable content, and then just engaging with people and not forgetting that you're supposed to talk to people, not just broadcast to people.
For sure. And then how long was that timeline from when you started to getting that award? Was it a year?
It was about a year. Yeah. I think I made that decision after it came out. I said, wait, why aren't I influencer of the year? And so I did probably 9 months. Yeah, probably 9 months. And I really saw results after 6 months. It takes time, right? It takes time. You have to get people engaged.
For sure. Did you run any kind of like paid advertising, or did you run any kind of promotion to kind of speed it up a little bit, like propel it?
You know, I didn't at first, because if you do it too soon, as we all know, that's not good, right? I paid more money for content, video. You know, what you guys do is amazing, right? Having professional photos. You know, my headshot is a strict headshot. It looks much better than this, by the way, because this is quarantine hair. It's a new style. It's you know, ugly chic.
Life.
And it's nice. It's cool. And you know, having videos, having content, having graphics, having the things that made you look professional were more important initially for me than paid. Then once I started to do that, then I did start to pay for some things, and most specifically, you know, promoting specific content or placing specific content. But I also had a lot of people volunteer to pay me. I do get paid for keynotes, to be fair. I get paid to do webinars. And so I had people start to say to me, hey, it looks like you're trying to get back out there. Like, we've got a keynote slot. We can pay you this much. I'm like, well, I can't take that because I'm working for a corporation, but I'll do your keynote. And so I did a lot of that, you know, placement in keynotes as well.
Awesome.
Very
awesome.
Cool. So, Zach, do you have any other questions? Because me and Janet spoke on the phone before, and I think we have a good way of wrapping. Might be a little bit long of a wrap up, but we have some good ideas for the ending.
You touched on everything that I had a question about. So yeah.
Okay. So we were talking earlier, you know, about the entire coronavirus and how businesses, big, small, solopreneurs, should be reacting, and you know what Strix Media has been doing, what Janet's been doing, what her clients have been doing. So I think that we should, you know, start a conversation around, which I feel this is getting repetitive at this point. But if you haven't listened to our other podcasts or you haven't taken action yet, you still have time. You know, there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of spare time depending on how you're working and what you have going on in your life. But
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the race goes to the bold and the swift, right? So I'm telling people fast is the new big. So there's money right now to be had. It doesn't feel like there is, but there is, right? Business owners have time, people have attention, workers have time, specifically in like medium businesses. That race goes to the swift. But if your marketing stinks, your marketing stinks. And it might feel uncomfortable right now to invest, but you have to do it. And one thing I would say is people can, you know, without a doubt, they can, you know, prepay, you know, negotiate a little bit with some of your providers, get on the phone with guys like Dan and Zach and say, hey, when we come back from this, we looked and we realized we're not good at, you know, specific things, but we want to be good at specific things, so you can prepay. And then I would say, you know, social selling is where it's at. So if you're not doing a good job on social media right now, if you've got an unprofessional look and feel on your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, if you're not, you know, doing content, for goodness sakes, work with somebody. I'll recommend Strix because I like them, or, you know, work with somebody locally to get that stuff done.
For sure. And I kind of want to touch on that. It's really just the idea of, you know, again, everyone's on their phones. Everyone's like you want to be in your clients' and customers' faces as often as possible, especially in this time. And it's really just not really like trying to sell, but just saying, hey, I'm a resource if you guys need help. Like
Right.
kind of positioning yourself as the help, as opposed to like, hey, I want to sell you something. You know, it's a very reverse way. You're positioning yourself as a value. Than trying to like ram down like a cold call sale. You know, it's a way different.
Yeah, you don't want. I've gotten some really bad examples of that, of people trying to sell. You want to help, right? How can I help you? But part of, you know, part of the thing is, if you want to help, it should be around something your business does, right? It shouldn't be, hey, can I take your garbage out? Or
no, yeah, of course.
Well, that's really nice of you, right? And you know, I've got some garbage. If anybody's close by, I could use some help. But it's about helping, and it's not wrong to promote your own business. So if you're thinking about, maybe you did some videos last year or some photos or some marketing, maybe there's something you can work. And again, I'll make it about you guys because we love you guys. Maybe Strix can cut those videos down for you and make them into something shorter. Maybe they can make you some gifts. Maybe they can make you some new media. Maybe they can make you tiles for social media. You know, there are ways to market right now, reusing some of your assets with somebody who's creative to make them work for social media, because so many people's assets were made for a physical world.
100%.
Right. And so now the physical world doesn't work anymore. How do you make it work in the virtual world? And I think that's key. And I would be remiss if I didn't say video works, even informal video, and a good video editor can make even an informal video look okay. So you can order a camera, you know, from your choice of place online. Dan volunteered at the beginning to, you know, tell you what to get. A good editor can make it look, you know, not as good as a studio, but close. And you can get a video out there. And we've been doing some videos informally, and they are our most viewed content. So don't be afraid to just be you and get on a video.
Yeah, don't talk yourself out of making content, you know, just get in front of the camera. And then another thing to build on what you said is little does everyone know, and I'm sure everyone does know, you know, right, that Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn do not show your content to everyone. So that being said, repost stuff from a year ago. Like, you don't have to touch it, repost it. Because if you're not spending money pushing it out via advertising, not everyone has seen it. Not everyone's heard your podcast. No, not everyone has seen your value-based video about 5 types of videos you should be doing during, like, just be busy and be productive. Get some stuff done that you know, maybe you've been putting off that is for your own brand. Personally, you know, really just get to work. Stay up late. I mean, like, you know, depending on who you're working for currently, you know, you can wake up late tomorrow and not be at the office at 9 a.m. You can wake up at 10:30, but stay up all night working, right? Or get up early and work more. You know,
we're working harder than we were before. We are working harder than we were before. We're prospecting more than we were before. It's harder to close deals, so you have to prospect harder. And we're really saying, look, when it comes back, there will not be time to do this. So content's a great example. We do, for technology firms, we write their social media content. Ashlyn's team is very busy because people are saying, I don't know what to say. And so, you know, can you tell me what to say? So we are seeing that. We're also doing social selling boot camps where we're teaching people how to do social selling. If you don't know how to do social selling, you got to learn, right? If you're in the tech industry, you know, give me a shout out. We'll get you in a boot camp. But if you're not, go look at Hootsuite's site. They have a $79 social selling certification, right? Learn to sell online.
Well,
it's not that hard.
Yeah, and that being said, there's tons of different resources out there. Facebook Blueprint, you know, YouTube, you know,
LinkedIn Learning.
YouTube's not great sometimes unless you're trying to learn something very specific, because a lot of people don't make like courses, because you're not going to learn you know, how to social sell in a quick, you know, 10-minute video. They're gonna have to be kind of chapters in that and kind of walk you through the process of things like that. Udemy, Skillshare.
LinkedIn Learning is like another really good one.
LinkedIn Learning is really good now. Yeah.
Well, they purchased Linda, so they are Linda, or
they're Linda. Yeah, so it's pretty good. Yeah. So learn and work your butt off. Like, just work, man. This is not a time to sit on the couch and eat Oreos. You can still eat Oreos. Look, I'm just going to share this. You can still have Oreos. I have Oreos. They're hidden in my little thing.
Oh, they're double stuffed.
I know, double stuffed. This is my game that I play with people. What's in your drawer? So what's in my drawer today is Oreos.
Nice. Another big thing I wanted to mention too, besides just creating content, that's another big part. Another way you could technically create content is just by jumping into the comments on social media. If you can jump into a Facebook group or find a relevant hashtag and give your input, every time you comment, your name and your brand, your personal brand, whoever you're commenting on your profile, that is being graffitied on that person's comment.
Social graffiti.
Social graffiti. Okay, I'm going to use that term today. But I will say, and I tell people this all the time, if you're trying to sell to customers, companies, everybody lives for the comments on their feeds, right? So the like is like the lazy guy's thumb up, right? You don't even have to do this. You just click. So that's lazy. But if you're trying to sell to a company and someone in that company is posting something, a comment is worth its weight in gold, because then when you reach out to them to connect, you're the person who commented on their post and made them feel good.
Well, and here's one of Zach's tips that I think is super important to speak to the social graffiti thing, is that don't just write a comment, write something that will
solicit a response.
Solicit a response.
Yeah, always a question. Like, let me ask another question. So you shared that, ask me something. How are you thinking about this? And people respond, and then it starts the dialogue.
Starting the conversation. Yeah.
Yep.
Love that.
Because
love that.
Because now you're doing two things, right? You're positioning yourself as a go-to resource. You're putting your name out there, and people are seeing you as a professional in that space.
That's right.
And you giving free advice to somebody on the internet might jumpstart a random person to come in there and say, hey, I'm trying to do this similar thing. I'm looking for a little more advice. Can you sit down with me for, a few, and then go over this? And there you go.
Other than customers we know, we get all our leads off social selling. So, when we know somebody, sure, that's different, right? That's referral marketing. But we do a lot on social selling, and it works very well. And if you can use this time to set yourself up in your content as an expert, and people, to your point, Zach, start following you or listening to you or saying, hey, so you talked about that. Do you do this? Or do you know who does this? It really works. And we're finding great success with it. And everybody can. It takes time. But you have nothing but time. There's no restaurants for you to go to, and there's no plays or concerts. So this is a gift to your business. You can work all the time, and it's okay. And
the top two places that I would go to, like right off the bat, well, maybe three. If your business is local, try local hashtags and use hashtag Morristown or hashtag Morristown NJ. And there's also a top section, so you can find all the people that are high profile, a lot of comments, a lot of likes, and jump into those conversations because there's more eyeballs on those pieces. Another big thing that people don't really take advantage of a lot is Facebook groups. There's literally a Facebook group for every particular niche that you can think of. Dan brings this example up all the time. There's a particular Facebook group for a certain color of a certain model car that exists. You can't
a certain year too.
And a certain year,
there is for everything.
Specific for that.
Yeah,
and
so by the way, LinkedIn too. LinkedIn has a thing, 1 million. And by the way, if you're a big LinkedIn social selling expert, and in a minute I have to go because someone's texting me saying, "But you're late." If you're a big LinkedIn social selling index person, actually doing that and commenting in groups gives you points. So if you're trying to raise your social selling influence and get the algorithm to bring you to top people's feeds, that's a cheap trick to do.
There you
go. All right, so let's wrap this up, Janet. Where can everyone find you? Where can they find your company? Plug yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So our website is jsgnow.com. On Twitter, I'm Channel Smart, so that's pretty easy. Send me a DM on Twitter, or you can find me the way my name is spelled right there, Janet Schijns, on Facebook or LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. So before we wrap this up, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Creative Collective Show. If you've made it this far, I'm assuming that you like our stuff. So hit that subscribe button on our Facebook, Instagram, on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. Let us know how much you love us, how much you hate us, what we're doing wrong, who you'd like to see on our next show. If you are watching this broadcast, comment #live. It really helps us out. It goes out to your friends if you comment on it. Facebook knows that you like it if you commented. So that means a lot as well. I'm not going to plug the other stuff right now. If anyone needs any help at all, video, photos, content, social media, you want to jump on a call with either me or Zach or both of us, we don't mind spending a half an hour, 30 minutes with you, really getting you hyped up and getting you in the right direction. If anyone's watching the stream, here's another thing. Every time I see a stream, I always ask what the software is that they're using in the comments because I'm always looking for the best software. Right now, this is our first day using StreamYard.com. I highly suggest checking it out. It's, in my opinion, slightly better than B.live because it gives you a counter. It allows you to have 6 people on the broadcast and HD quality. And
it puts all the comments from everywhere that you're streaming to into one area, and you can call out the comments wherever you want, which is really cool. I really love this feature. It's really simple interface too.
Yeah, it's very cool. I enjoyed it. Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.